if you guys see something, say something.
Got it. Thanks, Lee. And Lee, where are you? You're at Legal Services in Mid-Florida. That's where you are now.
Part-time, yeah, and then part-time I'm still doing a little consulting work. So the work that I'm doing here is all for CLSMF, and they're in Orlando. And I've worked off with them for a long time.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and just an interesting note, 90 miles from my house, they found a 16-foot python with eggs in it, like this week. I'll send you guys the link because it's really good. You got to watch the video because it's true Florida.
Yeah, and it was recently married to a Florida man. Is that what happened?
Yeah, probably. Okay, so Clicdata is the piece of software that we chose through the LSC disaster grant. It was actually, we bought it through the LSC disaster grant and then paid for an annual subscription. It's all web-based and it's like a data warehouse. It does a lot of the same stuff that Power BI, right? Does, except that, again, we don't have to host it. So, and that's kind of, I don't do hardware and hosting, and I don't like to do that stuff. And I've had a hard time depending on people to do that. So we chose this. And so far it seems okay. Sometimes there's a little bit of a load time that I don't know that you would experience if you were working on a client server system. But I, over the past few months, have built a whole bunch of pro bono reports in CLSMF's site because they had a big overhaul where they had to do, they worked with a consulting group to help them create new objectives and key indicators of success and all of that. And so we built all the LegalServer reports out, and then I'm trying to put them into a dashboard so that they can use them. And the more I started trying to wrap my brain around that, the more I realized that a single dashboard view wasn't going to be enough. So what I ended up doing so far, and this is, you guys will see how incomplete this is. I created like a tiered dashboard, and the intro screen has buttons that, all of this is configurable. I could have made it prettier. I might later, but we have their service data, which is, I'm kind of lumping into time slips and assignments and clinics, and then their panel data for recruitment, their actual pro bono users. And then the error checking dashboard I haven't started on yet, but we have a lot of error checking reports, that might look for things like you have a case assigned to the pro bono unit and it's waiting placement, but some of the fields aren't correct, so it's not going to be shown in certain reports in certain places. So maybe like funding code hasn't been set properly or case status hasn't been set properly. So I'm going to dump a lot of those into error checking as well. And the concept is that we're going to try and refresh it probably monthly. Well, definitely monthly, maybe more often. So I have really struggled with the API and LegalServer, and as simplistic and nice and easy to use as it is, it was a bit of a square peg round hole with Clicdata. And that was what Jeff and I were talking about a week or two ago. And so luckily they have pretty good customer service, and we have a lot of training hours with them. So I'll take you first to the connections. And this is, I have a few, most of which I haven't done much with yet. I've just connected, our Google Ads, our analytics. And then I had started down the path of using Excel files. So I also have it connected to my Google Drive account where I was putting reports out of LegalServer that were dumped to Excel. But I didn't really want to do that because I wanted the API to work. I wanted to be able to take advantage of that. And so we found a web connector called, it's just HTTP. And Jeff, when you and I were looking at it together, I'll show you a list of their connectors. I don't know if anybody is interested in seeing this, but.
For sure, yeah. I had not heard of Clicdata before you were looking at it, so I think lots of people are interested in what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, it's really user friendly, and it's really well, it's got a lot of built-in connectors that we already used, so, or things that I'm familiar with. But what I was trying to use, which is what they kind of recommended during our onboarding training, was their web service, because it seems to me like that would make the most sense. but it wasn't working. And so we ended up using their web connector, and I created one. Actually, I'll just pull up the one that we created. It's just called LegalServer Reports. I think if I click my cog, it's really simple. You just, I mean, I actually pasted in the entire string from the LegalServer report, and it immediately truncates it to this. And it set my port, it set my protocol, and then you can test the connection, and it'll tell you if the connection is working. And then the authentication is, you know, exactly what it sounds like. And so it's really easy to set up the initial connection. And so there's one connector for any number of reports that I want to bring in from LegalServer. And I'll show you how those reports get connected. Once it's been set up, there's also a tab here that'll tell me all of the data that I've connected through it. And we're going to go look at these in a minute. And there's also a way to add them to a single schedule so that it can call out. I think I've set my schedule up for pro bono reports on the 1st of every month. So it calls out on the 1st of every month, and it refreshes the data that's in the system. So once you do that, you've got your connector. And then I go back over here to tables and views. And then you can see all of the tables and or views, because I just found these yesterday and I was so excited I couldn't hardly stand it. So when we add another one, I have one that I have kind of queued up to add with you guys. Is that an appropriate way to go about this, Jeff or Michelle?
It's great.
Okay.
Perfect. You got me excited.
Sorry. Oh, and I have a bunch of dashboard working notes that I can share with you guys too, but I don't know how helpful those would be. Some of them are based on LegalServer stuff. So one of the first things that I realized was all those really fancy reports that I built, well, they're not fancy, but really detailed, well-documented reports that I gave to our pro bono team, they're all here. And I thought, well, I don't think I want to build a dashboard on these because those folks all have admin permissions to edit reports. And I didn't want my reports getting screwed up and then pulled in. So I made copies of them. And this one I just copied right before the call. And so what I've been doing is trimming the roles down to just administrator. Interestingly, the API reporting permission is not at play here at all. It doesn't affect the way that it pulls in because the authentication is happening on the connector, I guess.
Right,
so,
and that API key, that's a per report API key.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that it's not, I don't know, it just isn't looking at the role on the LegalServer report when it pulls it in to that particular data table. So I've just been setting them as inactive and then limiting them only to administrator user role and applying that so that, you know, even if they can find it, it's not, you know, probably going to be something they're interested in. They also have a copy of it that's documented, so they won't even look for it. Most people can't navigate list views when there's an active indicator applied.
And you want it, the reason that you want to keep these from being changed is because they act almost like a live database table once they're up and alive, and you wouldn't want somebody adding columns or changing names of columns or things so that it might break your data connector, right? Yeah,
it would have to rebuild the schema if that happened on the existing table in the warehouse in the Clicdata. That's right. So let me just refresh here. I also have noticed, because I really, Michelle's presentation originally on this group was helpful for me because I think you said something about how you keep your reports very succinct and very narrow. And I actually, with Clicdata, have had to take the opposite approach because of the issues that I have not been able to completely identify with getting some reports to feed in and other reports will fail. And I'm not sure, I haven't been able to figure out why. What I have noticed is that it has to do with, I think it has to do with the table structure. And I'm going to show you that in a minute. So like, if it goes too deep here, it's almost like the file can't be flattened correctly in some situations. But I think it's probably more complicated than that, and I can't figure it out. and I'll follow up with you guys later about that, Jeff.
So Lee, I just want to jump in, and one of the things that we've noticed, and I know a couple admins on the call have heard me reply to their emails with this, is that the reports API sometimes requires some additional permissions that are not evident. And one of those is that if you're including timekeeping, sometimes the reports API user role needs the ability to view all time slips as just an extra permission. And that might be one of the reasons that some of these larger reports fail.
Okay.
So that's just one thing to think about.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost as if it fails based on certain, like if I've got special settings on the columns to transform like a count into something, or like a date, time into month and year. Sometimes I've seen it fail in those situations, and then I can go and remove that and it'll come in. Other times it seems more like, well, I'll show you, I'll just follow up with you guys and the ones that, if we have time, which are failing. So I've had to figure out, well, first of all, I like to use my column labels instead of the LegalServer field name because I'm really careful about the way I label my columns and their end user reports. And then I've also figured out that I have to skip the XSLT processing and dump the raw XML in order for it to work with the Clicdata connector. I don't know why that is, but okay. So after I generate my key, I copy up until here, because remember my connector has the root already in it. So I'm only looking for the last part of the URL. So I'll save my report. And then I think if I move over here, cross your fingers, I'm under tables and views. So I'm going to go to add new external data. I'm going to add a table. And I'm going to pick, you can see the connectors that I have, or I can add a new connection from here, but I want my trusty LegalServer reports connection. In this, it's really simple. I click the path file name and then paste in what I just took out of the report. Kind of eyeball it to make sure I didn't get any extra slashes. I usually look to make sure the end numbers are the same, because if I got them wrong, then obviously it's going to break. 1A1. Okay. So once I have that, I cross my fingers and click the next button, and then it's going to upload the file. It's looking at it. And then the key that has been really tricky, and this is where I get my failures, is in this node section. So what I get often on the ones that fail, I don't get an error message necessarily. I just get nothing but the root. It's not reading my rows. So I have to come into the node and click my rows, because those are my columns. And so that's why it almost feels like when I'm too many rows deep, like the one that fails is the KPI report, which is actually built on, supposed to be unduplicated. And so it goes from the cases root over to the most recent case for client, and then all of the data fields are from there. And it's almost like the API doesn't make that extra jump to flatten out my file, if that makes any sense. I know I'm not.
Yeah, it could be. We can take a look at it.
So once I've done that, and this toggle field has to be set to green, to yes, which is by default, because that's the substructure. Then I can kind of eyeball my schema. And I'm
What's a schema, Lee?
I don't know. It just says schema. I'm just reading it.
Well, I guess it's really that, right? It's the layout of like a little map of your database. If you thought of an Excel spreadsheet that you couldn't change, so that your data was consistent every time, that would be like a schema, the framework into which data is plugged.
Exactly. So if they had, to your point, Jeff, if they had added another column or removed another column from the report, then it would, on the refresh, it wouldn't, it would need some interaction by a human in order to get it to load that data.
I'm just slowing you down in case there's anybody here who hasn't had their coffee yet and they're trying to keep up with your
I'm sorry,
smarty
I had
pants.
too much coffee, and that So what I have decided to do with mine is create a unique key in the schema of the Clicdata table so that if I'm appending data later, it can remove those based on the whatever I've chosen as my unique key. And that's obviously different depending on what set of data I'm looking at. So in our panel or user-based reports, I'm actually using the LegalServer database user ID, database ID for the user module to deduplicate those rows or to make sure that they're not appending the same people over and over again. So I'm going to pick a key. And then there's some stuff with error handling that you can do. I leave it this way so I get some empty data. I don't want it to stop my load if there's an error in a row. And then you can kind of preview. And that's where it just shows you your table with actual data in it. I think it previews the first 50 rows. So this is one that actually I needed to take out. And I've struggled with this a little bit too. There have been some reports that I've brought in where I believe that it may be bringing in some of my hidden columns on the report. And so I have to go back to LegalServer because I don't want any client data in here. If this is attorney data, that's okay, but I don't want any client identifying information. So I usually just eyeball it here, see what I've got. I'll go ahead for purposes of demonstration and import this rather than go through that again. But I really will have to go back and remove some of these names. So once I click the Finalize button, it's actually creating my table in Clicdata. So it's ready for me to build with. And I can add it to a schedule if I want to. So I'll show you how to do that. I actually prefer to do that in a batch. Under automation, there's a schedules area. And I created a single schedule for all of my pro bono reports so I can add them all together. You could also schedule each table separately as well.
Look at that. It's at a polite time, too. 12 a.m. I saw that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for not doing it 9 a.m. on a Monday.
You're welcome. So it kind of tells me because Clicdata is like a, you know, there's a limit to how much data we can house in it. And I don't know if you guys have noticed that down here in the corner. I mean, it's telling me how many, it estimates the number of data refreshes and to make sure, you know, you can manage your data load and that you're not going over, you know, a total of 30,000 refreshes a month, which I don't think I'm in any danger of doing. So once I'm here on the schedule, I can add my new report, or my table rather. So I'm going to say I want it to do a data refresh. It does all kinds of stuff that I have never. You can automate dashboard publishing, like so that it updates your website page. You can have it send an email to your executive director. Hey, look what we're doing. You can have it notify yourself for certain things. But I just want to refresh my data right now. And I think once I've done that, it loads up over here. I can name it. What report did we just do? It was called Pro Bono Case Placement Time. And there's, I think, 5 different ways to skin this cat that I'm doing, maybe the hard way, but I kind of wanted you guys to see how the schedules work. So where is my, I don't see it. Do you guys see it? I don't see it. I add it over here. Well, let's back out of this. Back to tables. What did I name it? Oh, I forgot to name it. That's my bad. This is it right here. I think. Let's check it out. This isn't the same one. I did click save, right?
I was wondering. I was staring at the save button, thinking, has she hit that yet?
Did I click it? All right.
I don't know.
Well, you want to see a repeat? It shouldn't take as long. Let's see.
Seeing it one more time sounds helpful anyway.
Sorry, guys.
Right. So you got your method, and now you got your URL from the report that you've enabled for API, and you grab the end of that, including the API key, which is that part there at the end.
Yeah. I usually use tags too, because I know that we'll get us skipping some stuff, but this is cases. And then I often add a date and timestamp to my column so that I can see if it's appending my table when it was, I could see some value in knowing when that data was added. Okay, so again, I went back to my node and I clicked my rows. That's where I want my column headers. And you guys saw the rest of this stuff. I'm just gonna go ahead and click next and make sure I click the save button this time.
Things that could get you banned. All fields for all cases for all time with no filters. Updated every hour.
Right? I don't think this report was that big. I think it was like 100 and some rows.
It's probably fine. I'm just warning. I mean, it's something that we've got to get better instrumentation on, but there's ways to abuse the system, which would be writing report with overly broad filters and running it in daytime hours and that sort of thing. But this is fine.
Okay, so it looks to me like it's ready. Let's just add the schedule that way. Okay, so right now, here's the table we just created. So now I have it hooked up. While we're on this tables and views area, the other thing that I found yesterday that I really liked was the views. And you can create a new view based on data that you're already pulling in. So it's a way to create tables from what you already have in the warehouse without calling back to the API. And that's really helpful for me because the way that I mean, it uses SQL, but it's like kind of dummy style SQL. So let's do a test view. And then you get to select the data tables that you already have, or from the data tables that you already have. So I'll do a simple example. I'm going to click my pro bono panel data source, which is really just like a list of all of the current users with some of their settings, current pro bono users with some of their settings. So I can select that for my view. And then I'm going to create it. And this is a really cool, I thought, really cool interface for people like me. It shows my data source at the top as I brought it in. Pardon me. So you can see all of my columns from the report, all of the information that's there. And one of the things I did yesterday was I split the service counties because I wanted to be able to put up a pie chart or some sort of graphical representation of where the attorneys are servicing.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the way it comes in from LegalServer, it's split because it's multi-select. So we can try it with problem codes and see if we can split those. Might not be quite as successful. Actually, I'll try service counties again just because I know I had success with that. So
Yeah.
I used the text splitter, and you just drag it up here and you drop it. And I'm going to say I did it. It was called single service county.
Wow, that is cool and easy.
Isn't it neat? And then I pick my source service county, and I tell it what my delimiter is, which is a comma. And then you can preview what's going to happen. So this is a two-step fix, right? So I've got it. It split it all out. See, Marion and orange just to Marion and orange. But what I noticed was that it would probably be pretty hard to aggregate in a dashboard because of the spaces. So I'm going to save this. And then I did, what was it? Normalize. And I drag that over here. So it's going to show you, I don't know if it took me a minute to look at the little arrows in between the top and the bottom, which is my original and then my result table. But if you can kind of see behind it in the shadow, one of the boxes is what you're doing to the top, and the other is what you're going to do to the output afterwards. So I've got my column now. I should have my new single service county column because I'm working with my results set. And I trimmed. What did I do? I removed all spaces, but I think I want to trim left spaces. And then if you preview that, you can see that it's cleaned it all up.
That is lovely. So I just want to recount where you are right now. On the top is a table essentially that's created from data that you grab from a LegalServer report, and you're showing it now, and it's got essentially like sort of like transforms between the top and the bottom, or effects. I'm thinking of it like sound, where you have like your original sound and then reverb, and then on the bottom is your remixed audio. Yeah,
well, I guess I don't really understand a lot of that. Yeah, I think you're probably right. So actually, this normalize thing goes, I don't know. Okay, it's okay. So you could do other stuff. Change it into all caps. I could do that, or it's just a place where you get to fix your data. Yeah.
Is it possible that your delimiter could have just been comma space?
I tried it and it didn't work.
It didn't work. Yeah.
Yeah. Good question. So let's see. How did I save this? What do we have now? Oh, the only thing I don't like about this system is that you have this tiny little disk icon save button in the top, and I have overlooked this several times.
I'm looking for it right now. I don't see it. Where is it? Oh, there it is.
Like this little tiny thing up here. So once I save it, then modifications have been saved. Okay. Then if I go back to my list of all my tables and views, you'll see that I have my third test view here, and these act exactly like data sources for dashboards. So I'll show you how I used these yesterday. I'll move over to the dashboard view unless people have other questions.
No, show us the pretty stuff.
Oh, actually, one more thing. The views are extra cool, I think, because you can schedule them along with your data. So when it pulls in my LegalServer data from the panel report, it will also then readjust my view. It does everything automated on the same schedule. So it rebuilds the first tables, and then it rebuilds all the view tables that are based on the first tables. Okay, dashboards. So my panel dashboard is here. And I am not a graphic designer by any means, so I think that's probably something that I need to work on. I think I could spend a million hours trying to fix this stuff as far as graphic, like display colors and contrast and all of that. But for now, this is what we've got. I'm in the view, like the end user view right now. So, and I'm here because I wanted to show you guys, there are little widgets that you can put on options when you're doing the administration stuff, the admin work, to let them download. And there's also some that allow you to, I don't have a good example of that one. Hang on. allow you to link back to the LegalServer report where they can look at the details, which I really liked. I'll go to the intro and just walk through it. So I want to go to panel, user data. I don't know.
And how are you sharing this out with the people you want to communicate to? How do you?
I haven't done it yet. I think I'm just going to give them a URL.
Got it.
Sorry, I'm not clicking the right thing. I need to click my edit pencil. Okay, so I'll go to Services Dashboard first. And this is the configuration. And I like my grid. So I added grid lines just so I knew where I was dropping things.
Cool.
I will edit this widget first. So over here, actually, you've got like a whole bunch of widgets you can drag and drop. There's a couple of different view options. This one shows you the categories. This one shows you like the whole list of things you can drag and drop. So, I mean,
that Margaret Harrell, she closes a lot of cases. Is that what I'm seeing there?
Who?
I don't know. I see a name, Harrell, Margaret Harrell, those 9 cases in the time period. I'm just trying to see what your dashboards are actually telling us.
Yes.
Oh.
This is for the month, last month.
Wow.
So if you want to look at the pie chart one, we can edit that one. There's a little cog, tiny. So you have, you drag and drop the widget, and then you tell it on the properties. You get to give it a color scheme. You can give it a style, and you can create new styles. This is all designer stuff I will probably never touch. So I just picked navy blue as my style and my flat color scheme here for now. And then, you know, you can turn widgets on and off in certain places. There's also situations where based on other factors, like there's a whole area where you can write queries and formulas and then make your things show up in a dependent fashion. And I've not even dug into that. So I can't even answer any of that. So it's like a 3-position toggle. And then the data is where you tell it right here which table you want to pull in. And the cool thing about the views is that even though a widget only allows you one data source, you can create views that merge together several of your tables if you want to do that. So you could get like a bigger widget if you wanted to do the linking and stuff. So once you've got your data source, then you just drag, like I did the distinct count for values and the caseworker name for the categories, and that creates the pie chart. Does anybody want to see more about that? Does that seem pretty logical? You can do sorts and filters. The filters I have struggled with because I noticed when I was setting up filters that I haven't figured out a way. It actually adds like a filter to the dashboard for the user to interact with. And I didn't want to make it that complicated. I only wanted them to be able to look at last month's stuff right now. So that was why I went to the views and created views that I could limit with date ranges. Style and format lets you add, you know, all this little stuff. It lets you show your legend. You can do stuff with your pie. You can do the labels. You can add pop-up tooltips that show in certain places. So all kinds of formatting options that are here. And then the interactions is the one that I really liked because what we can do with these is you can do a double click and open the URL to the actual report in LegalServer. And if we do that,
nice.
It's like tricking people into actually looking at LegalServer reports. Awesome.
Yeah. So if I were to, for example, grab this report URL.
That is very cool.
There.
That's awesome.
And then what I also did was with the tooltip, I put something like double click this,
One, Lee, have you thought about trying to put any of these in an iframe inside of LegalServer so you have?
No, but I could, I'm sure, yeah, right? The instruction box would support it. And then I also added, if you change filter settings on the LegalServer report, this dashboard will not change. And I know that's probably overkill instruction, but the first thing I thought was, oh, well, if it lets me click into the LegalServer report, I would think that I could change the filters and then my pie chart would adjust. So I just put a note out there for that. And then once you add an interaction, your tooltip little things start, it'll pop up. You can actually tell it where to put the tooltip. I was putting them kind of over here on the left side, trying to be consistent. But then when you're in end user mode, if you double click it, it'll load up. It'll open the LegalServer report in a new browser tab.
Haha, Ron, did you hear that? New browser tab. It's one of Ron's pet peeves when take over what you're doing. New browser tab.
Is that good?
It's good. It's good.
I agree. Okay. So we've got time contributions, and then I've got like a little cases. It's a CSR, really, with the grand total at the beginning, where you can kind of scroll right and left. I'm not sure about this one. You can scroll up and down and right and left. I don't know. So I put like a little tip in there. I don't know if they'll get that or not. We'll see how it tests. But, you can drag line charts over and then pick your data and make everything pretty. And I think... Oh, also, one of the things that it does that I do like is if I navigate away without making saving my changes, when I go back, it reminds me, which is kind of a nice feature. So if I go back to that dashboard again, which I think I was on services, and I go back to edit it, it's asking me, and it'll tell you like a few hours ago too. So if I say you want to recover and save it, yes, but I'm not going to save my changes now. So there's nice. A whole bunch of widgets I haven't had the chance to work with yet. I'll just show you the panel dashboard real quick.
While Lee's doing that, I just want to say on the integration end of things, it was pretty early on that she and then when we were together were able to confirm that we were getting data out of the report. So, and a way to test this if you have a different platform other than Clicdata that you're going to play with is to use Insomnia or something like that. Confirm that you can hit the report and that it's listening and that you have your credentials correct and that sort of thing. Because once you get to that point, then it's just learning the piece of software that you're using to make the connection, right, Lee?
Right, and we did use Insomnia, even though it was a little bit, I think I have that on my desktop. Do you want me to launch it if people want to see it?
I'll put a link to it in chat. It's just a way to do API testing.
Yeah, the other thing that I noticed was that there were a couple of dashboard reports that I had created in LegalServer where, and I was looking for them before we started the call, but I did notice that I'll just pick my deprecated one because that one's got to go. This is one that wouldn't merge with Clicdata, and I have not had the chance to figure out why yet. But if you load it, and then if you have the API thing hooked up right here, I got one or two to fail to load when I downloaded it. So if I download the dashboard output, it should load up this. Like it's gonna actually, it'll look better in a second. But that's what I want to see, is that the XML output, is looking like I would expect it to. But there were a couple that were showing me, they weren't showing me this. They were showing me errors, and it would tell me which line it was causing a problem in. And I don't know if I should send those to you or not, Jeff or Michael.
Sure.
Because that seemed like a red flag to me. If I couldn't get the XML file to download, and open in a browser window, how could the API work?
Yep. You can send us the example. We'll look.
Okay. So I think, you know, unless you guys want to explore the Clicdata stuff a little more, it's still pretty raw in my desktop, but I'm happy to look at more stuff with you.
What's it cost, Lee?
What's it cost? We paid for an annual subscription. I think we got it for around $5,000, and that was with 12 hours of training, which I haven't used many of. I think I've used 2 or 3.
How many users?
I'm gonna say 2.
2 admin users, but you can share out the result of what you're doing with probably however many people you want. Right?
Yeah, and you can also build, you can add widgets, like filter widgets to the dashboard so people can interact with them, you know, like a LegalServer report without report building permissions similarly. Only they don't need to log in. You can open them up so that they're just a web-based, like a web page.
And I guess part of your value proposition there is you're not just using it for LegalServer reports, you're using it for a whole bunch of other. You're really using it as a business intelligence platform for lots of other things too, right? Right. That was the reason that we got it. It actually wasn't for pro bono, but I had already launched a pro bono project, which is why we did it that way. And that way I had some easy stuff to work with where I already knew the data. But we're going to use it to, you know, look at stuff like, you know, what's the cost of doing a case in certain situations. And so we are going to bring in, you know, eventually accounting information. They're going to use it for management of staff and allocating time. And then we also have ArcGIS, which I'm working with quite a bit. And I'm really curious to see how those 2 things will work together. If I can bring in some of my maps that we're building for that into a dashboard. Very, very cool. Thank you so much, Lee, for showing everybody this. You're welcome. Do people have other questions? We're almost 10 before the hour. Yeah, let me say it again. Lee, that was awesome. It really was. It was very fun to see. Very fun to see you go from 0 to using the tool. And I'm sure there's some other integrations they all have that similar issue. Where are you going to get it from out of LegalServer? You got to build a report that's going to be the basis of the data. You have to, you know, turn on the API endpoint and then learn your way around connecting it. So it makes a lot of sense. There are other kinds of integrations though, besides business intelligence or, you know, pulling things out of reports. Does anybody on the call have one project that they're working on for integrations?
I was wondering, I don't, to answer your question, but I was wondering, this is Nate, I was wondering if folks have thoughts about like actually like what they put in their dashboards and how you develop metrics that your staff like actually look at reliably and find useful and actionable. I think that's a really hard challenge too, to figure out what to put in these dashboards. So I'd be really interested in experiences that people have with that.
And think it too, that accent Nate's got to, sometimes the bigger issue is get him to understand what it is they're actually looking at and what it means. You know, managers, they just like looking at lists of cases and, oh, this person has too many cases open or this one doesn't enough. And there's more to that than meets the eye sometimes. So, but that sort of high level view, like people are more granular in their view of things.
I mean, before I came to LegalServer, I spent a couple of years developing reports and then as a ED explaining reports. And I think the biggest thing is really setting the expectations for the audience, right? This is what you're seeing. This is exactly why you're seeing it. This is what this field means, right? And I know I spent several board meetings explaining to the board, hey, this report that you're looking at isn't showing you what you think it's showing you. You told me you wanted to see X. I'm showing you X, but there's also all of this other stuff that we do that isn't captured here, right? And being really clear with what you can and can't see, it can be very difficult to people who want to just see everything and not understand what everything is. And that doesn't really answer your question, Nate. But I mean, I think that a lot of times it's not enough for us to develop these reports on our own by ourselves, but it's really a long process of give and take with the people who are going to use them. Going, does this help? Is this an improvement? Is this too much detail? Is this not enough detail? And working through that on a iterative basis.
I'm thinking of one of my friends in industry who there's a rule that you can't show any report or chart or graph to a C-level person at the company without it going through a special couple of people who have to bless them to make sure that the report says what you say it says before you show it to anybody. Before we drop off, I did want to mention that we have, so APIs are not the only way to do integrations. We're really interested in whatever people want to show, and I'm sure this is Michelle's idea, is to keep sharing around integrations people are working on. But Michael, you want to say something about the API token change?
Sure. So for those of you who haven't seen it yet, we've got our new API documentation at apidocs.legalserver.org. And I've been posting their updates to various API endpoints within LegalServer as they come out. And one of the updates that recently came out is we now support token authorization. So rather than giving someone a username and password, you can a user can get assigned an API token that's good for a year, and that token can get put into the outside integration. So there's a write-up of that on the API docs, but this is a nice way to not use a username and password. And the benefit is that the token cannot get used to log in to LegalServer itself, right? They can't impersonate a user by using that token. They can just access the API queries using that token. And that's whether you're using reports APIs or our standard core APIs or our legacy APIs, it all works the same. And if you're familiar with API headers, it's just a bearer token. And so that's available. There's still some tweaks, like right now you can generate it, you get the token once, and then it's good for a year. One of the things that we'll add on to that at some point is the ability to name the token as you generate it so that you know what it is you generated when. But right now it's just based on date.
Awesome. So thank you, Michael.
Will you be able to resend those tokens? Or?
Well, once you generate it, that's it. So you never see it again. You can cancel it early if you want to, and you can recreate a new one. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you give me a quick use case scenario for how would it be for like pro bono attorneys or no?
No. So this is for, instead of using, when you authenticated all of those reports, right? You used the username and password that was your API user, right? Rather than telling Clicdata your API user's username and password, you could instead give them the token, and it'll use the token as though it's your user.
Okay, so then that would dodge that whole, I guess, hurdle where we have to reset if like staff is required to reset their password every 3 months.
Right. So the token still expires in a year, so you have to set that up on a regular basis, but it's more than 3 months. So
yes, the answer is yes, Lee, for sure. And it's so funny, like that user password thing is in some ways simple, but it actually confuses some people, like that they need to create a sort of fake user that's who's API, and now we have another way. I mean, yeah, Michelle's asking, any ideas for next meeting topic?
One thing I'd love to hear more ideas about Jeff, you mentioned iframes earlier and like all the different ways those can be used. Like we have one kind of small example that I'd be happy to show. I think there's probably just a lot of creative ideas out there about like how to incorporate what people are already doing in LegalServer with processes across your organization and how to try to save time and integrate those in a less codey sense of the word integrate, but just like make things flow smoother across your departments. So I was wondering if anyone had, I have like one quick example to show, and I would love to hear other ideas or other ways people are using that or suggestions from LegalServer if you guys have examples.
Yeah, we could have somebody show the New York City, what's it called? Help make it, and I can't remember what it's called. Just Fix. So it's essentially, it's a special iframe. The iframe, we can send them some information about the case.
Am I calling her out? I don't think she's still on the call anymore. She was here earlier. Mallory's done a presentation on that before, right?
Oh, that's right. That's right. So there's a couple of them. I think that's a great idea. We might be able to get the word out to the whole group if you like, Michelle.
But please, like any other ideas or suggestions. I just thought about that when you mentioned that earlier, Jeff.
Oh, I'm not seeing any. I don't know. Sue Edmonds, is being really quiet. I'm sure she has a swell idea. So she thinks she'd like to integrate a cocktail mixer into LegalServer.
I have no ideas. None.
Okay.
Alan,
I'm sorry?
Alan should have something.
Oh, I think we lost him. Okay. Well, let's do iframes.
I'm here. I have a lot of things I want somebody else to tell me how to do. I don't have anything that I can actually show.
Well, let's do iframes, and then Michael, who else can I pick on from my team? Looks like Michael, you get to be the one picked on.
Can I ask this one thing? Is anybody using the Google Docs integration with LegalServer where you can basically have, instead of using the SharePoint, use your Google Drive, shared Google Drives to have documents show up? I'd love to see that actually work.
We're actually doing a document integrations training session on March 9th.
Okay.
So that's our Tuesday training that day, and we'll go over Google Drive, SharePoint, and Dropbox. Or I think I'm. All
right, I can wait for that. I got plenty to do until then.
Well, that'll actually probably come before this meeting next month.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks. It will, but we can mention that on the iframe call, which I'm looking at noon on March 12th. Michelle, that'd be another month. Looks like we're on a monthly cycle here.
March 12th, that sounds good to me.
Okay. We will do that. And there was a thing that we did where we did an iframe. There's a fancy iframe in LegalServer. The idea was that for each time you created for each case, you could have a separate Google Doc, essentially, that we kind of had a concept of a long time ago and never really got adopted by anybody as their favorite thing. So Michael, when you and I talk, we'll see if we can unearth that feature. And the idea is, what it does is it appends a unique sort of ID to the Google Doc when you create it. And so it would be something like, well, right now I can't think of an example, but you could even have like a template, the template of a memo template right there that is a source document, and then for each LegalServer document, you can sort of embed that special special document. I'm not explaining it very well, but we will show it to you because it's sort of related to iframe on March 12th at noon with your regular host, Michelle, whose swell idea all this was. Great. And Michelle, you and I can coordinate on exactly whose arms we need to make sure we twist. But Lee did a great job. A hand for Lee. Good job. Thank you. All right. See you all in March. Bye, everyone.
Thanks all.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.